All right, so I think we got a good one today. I told you guys back when we did the 10900K, or even prior to that, when Phil and I sat here and discussed the specs that were finally, embargo lifted, so we could tell you all about the new product stack coming from Intel. I specifically said the 10600K was going to be my favorite CPU to take a look at because it takes place in what I feel is like a battleground price point, about $230 to $250. I say two because there's a weird F SKU now that exists in Intel CPUs. We get the 10600K, which has an iGPU for $262, or the 10600KF for forget the iGPU. I don't know what the F stands for, but it takes the iGPU out and you save 25 bucks. Now you're talking like $237. So it makes it a very good battleground CPU price at a place I think a lot of people shop for, versus AMD's 3600X, which occupies that same price point. Asterisk at the time of making this video because AMD is currently slashing prices on CPUs to compete, which means even more competition and better value. So let's take a look at performance at this price point today and see who reigns supreme at that price point. I keep iterating the price point. It's definitely a price point battle.
We interrupt this video to bring you a special message from iFixit. Bring you iFixit by the makers of iFixit. Got a crappy graphics card? That's okay. Fix it with iFixit. iFixit has all the tools you need to make your life better. Got a dirty phone screen? That's okay. You can fix it with iFixit. Thirsty? That's okay. Fix that thirst with iFixit. Refreshing. Use iFixit to fix your computer or even just upgrade it. Cool. iFixit can fix anything, even this and this. Got a problem with your friend? Fix him too with iFixit. They'll appreciate it. Guaranteed.
Disclaimer, iFixit does not actually cause spills, fix friends, fix cars, fix tires, or fix things that are not designed to be fixed with iFixit tools. But that's okay, because iFixit is cool anyway.
To find out more, click the link in the description below.
Yeah, iFixit Explosion.
All right, so a few things to understand here spec-wise. The 10600K, for all intents and purposes, is an 8700K that has the new, it's just a new algorithm for self-boosting, if you will. CPUs have started to really push themselves in terms of self-adjusting frequencies based on many conditions. We talked about this many times. AMD does the same thing. So you'll get like a single and a dual core boost, and then you'll get like an all core boost. And it looks like it kind of looks like a fuel table in a ECU MEP, if you will, if you understand cars. So it's kind of like if these conditions are and this load is this, then these amount of cores are used, then do this frequency. And it's always bouncing around and fluctuating. So what we did today was we did a complete gamut of testing. So we did the usual Cinebench R20, single core, dual core. Single core we test because what that allows us to do is see what the, I keep calling it an algorithm, logic. We'll call it logic. We keep seeing what the boost logic does with single core testing, and it goes up to various frequencies on each CPU. So for the Intel system, well, let's start with AMD. The AMD system's clock speed is 3.8 gigahertz. Like that's the base clock, that's what it's supposed to run. But based on various like parameters we just said, that can change. But the 3600X will basically go up to 4.4 gigahertz on a single core. And I think two cores can actually go up to 4.4 gigahertz. But then all core is up to 4.2, and that's going to depend again on various things. The Intel system, and it's funny, I just tested all this, but I have to look at my cheat sheet, otherwise I get it wrong. So one core turbo frequency is up to 4.8 gigahertz. So that's significantly down from the 10900K, which is up to 5.3, which is kind of funny because it's the same silicon, it's the same process, and it's the same cores, but whatever, I digress. Up to, well, 6 cores is up to 4.5 gigahertz. So in terms of a direct comparison between these two CPUs when it comes to core clock, Intel's higher across the board, no surprise there, it's the way it's always been. But AMD now allowing single cores to go up to 4.4 shows that they're definitely starting to push their reliability at that clock speed. But Jay, down all the way back in like the 9590 or 9570, those were 5 gigahertz CPUs. Yeah, but they also were based on like Zambezi and all that, and they were terrible. Bulldozer era was just a dark time for AMD. We don't mention clock speed because it didn't matter back then because the IPC and the general architecture of the CPUs were garbage. And I'm sorry to anyone still running the CPU. I feel for you.
They bulldoze their own performance.
Okay.
And then they tried to excavate the body, but then it didn't work.
Stop it! And then they pile drive themselves into the ground. If you guys don't get it, these were the code names of those: excavator, bulldozer, excavator, pile driver. Anyway, when it comes to testing, we did single core on Cinebench, all core obviously. We did Geekbench, which is also a single and a multi-threaded BMW blender test. And then we did some gaming, because at this price point too, it's not just about the CPU. This is a great price point for gaming rigs. And so a lot of people shopping for a $230 CPU, I think that falls right in the middle of many people's budgets. It's not ridiculous, it's not twice as much for big high-end $500 CPUs, but you're not really, kind of scrimping and cutting a lot of corners and going with a super budget like $100 CPU. So it's a good middle ground. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and just show you guys the benchmarks. Let's show you the charts, because we got some things to talk about. It's not as simple as it used to be. Oh, and then obviously we did out-of-the-box settings and then overclock settings, because that's how we do things around here. And that's actually what's going to trigger a lot of today's discussion. So those of you that paid attention to the charts, you might have even backed it up a couple of times to think that maybe we made an error, and you were looking at some numbers going, wait a minute, Jay. Why are some of the numbers on the overclocked AMD rig lower than when you had it out of the box? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because of precision boost, which is the logic that we just discussed with CPUs wanting to self-boost, I told you that it was specifically up to 4.4 gigahertz, depending on how many cores were loaded and the type of task that it's doing. Well, on AMD, we've talked about this already since the 2000 series. There seems to be about a 4.2 gigahertz wall. Stop going to sleep over there. We got a video. We're making a video. Okay. We got about a 4.2 gigahertz wall that we can hit, or that we can't really surpass at all core. So all 6 cores, all 12 threads at 4.2 gigahertz. On standard AIO, non-exotic cooling and crazy voltages and stuff, we can't get it to post beyond 4.2. 4.3, sometimes 4.4 you can actually get it to boot, but it's not something weird to 4.3. But 4.4, it's not stable. We can't get through the test. Sometimes we can't even get through Windows to boot, or we get just straight up lockups and I gotta clear CMOS and get the system back. So what that has done, it has caused a reduction in performance in anything single-threaded. So you will see a Cinebench all-core score that went up, but a single-core score that went down because the clock speed went down with it. And the same thing kind of holds true for gaming, where some of the gaming benchmark numbers didn't change at all when we overclocked it. Some went down because of the fact that the type of game that it is, if it's not really heavily multi-threaded, and if it's using that world thread or that single core, and it's no longer going past 4.2 and not to 4.4 like it could before, all we did by overclocking our system was reduce its overall performance. Now on Intel, on the other hand, you would notice a significant increase. Now this is gonna sound very fanboyism, but I'm sorry, AMD has got a superior IPC clock for clock. But we don't live in a clock for clock world right now. So the 10600K handily beat the 3600X across the board in every single test, which was expected, if you want to know the truth, because they are both 6-core, 12-thread CPUs. Now to make this as apples to apples as possible, what we did for the gaming test, because I'm sure you noticed the FPS on Intel's system significantly higher on the Intel system, specifically because of clock speed. We know for gaming rigs, Clock speed reigns supreme. There's no denying that. And I think anyone that's ever played around with their own overclocks would notice that. Now what happens on the Intel rig is it only goes up to 4.8 gigahertz on single core application or single core tasks. 4.5 gigahertz on all core. Well, we were able to get 5.1 gigahertz across the board, all core overclock on the Intel system with only about 1.3 volts to do it with our AIO, our all-in-one water cooler, keeping temperatures in the mid-80s. Now, I know mid-80s might sound high, but remember, we're talking 5.1 gigahertz, and temperature definitely scales exponentially with frequency, just like power draw does. We're talking 600 megahertz overclock on the all-core. So that is why the Intel system just completely dominated the 3600X. And that's what I predicted might happen when Phil and I were talking about this when it came down to core for core. Now you have a decision to make here. Okay, Jay, I hear what you're saying. So you're saying I should buy the 10600K. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's that simple. It looks on the surface like, okay, at this price point, that's what you should buy. And that's true for this price point. However, the CPU market is a lot like the GPU market now, where you add 30 bucks to your budget and you're in a whole nother tier of system. So you could add 30, 40 bucks to your budget and now you're sitting at a 3700X, which is an 8-core, 16-thread CPU, which is going to edge out the 10600K in anything multi-threaded. You're not going to get any more clock speed out of a 3700X or a 3700 than you are at a 3600X. They're all the same architecture. Zen 2 on 3000 series chip. That's where it becomes really difficult to make the recommendation. If you are like, I've got $230 to spend, okay, $237 to spend on a CPU, and that's it, well, then you got to give it to the 10600K. Higher FPS all around at both 1080p and 1440. We showed 1440 in here too because we know 1080p, high FPS games, 2080 Super that's overclocked, because again, we're checking for things like bottlenecking to see if both systems are hitting their limit CPU-wise, what happens to the FPS. The same graphics card was used in both systems. I took it out of one and put it in the other. So there's no ASIC differences there. There's no self-boosting differences. It was locked at the overclock speeds that we put in there and then measured the differences between the two. And when you have the same graphics card and two different performance, then you can say it's a CPU bottleneck or a CPU is holding back the overall performance. It's even, again, not that cut and dry because unless you're building a brand new system from scratch, you can't upgrade to a 10600K. Even if you're running an 8700K, which is like basically the same type of thing, only it lacks any of the thermal velocity boost. It's just weird. It's like, you take temperature and then speed and then it's like
and then turbo
and then yeah.
But then they can't say turbo because they already used turbo.
Yeah. So it's boost. But anyway, so I feel like AMD's done two things right moving forward from this. One, they reduced the price of the 3900X by $100, making it about $410 give or take, depending on reseller or retailer markup. That definitely made it a CPU worth buying over the 10900K because that's nearly $100 more. And although the 10900K is beating the 3900X in some applications, they're trading blows, but 3900X has 2 more cores. They also made it, and they reversed their decision about not supporting older CPUs on B550 and vice versa. So not being backwards compatible from B550 moving forward. So 4000 would only work on B550 and not B450 and et cetera. So they reversed their decision on that. And they've made some changes into how the BIOS memory and such is working so that it can support the newer-ish CPUs. So you don't get that with Intel though. It's a complete, although the socket looks the same, it's completely different. In fact, the notches are on the bottom of the CPU now instead of the top. So you can't even try to put in another CPU to see what happens. I have a feeling voltage traces are changed. So if you put an old CPU in there and it was like fitting in there, you'd probably blow it up. But you've got to buy a whole new motherboard. And we all know new motherboards and stuff with new platforms don't come down in price right away. In fact, Paul even did a tweet earlier today, which I thought was hilarious. He's like, the price differential between the cheap Z490 and the expensive is $149, $1,099. A $1,099 motherboard. Granted, it's one from ASRock and it has the crazy built-on water block and stuff. It can still cost a pretty penny. But the fact that you can't necessarily get a Z490 board for under $150, it's one of those things where you'd want to, with a chip that's about $250 or $230, pair it with like a $100 motherboard. It's one of those things where if you're just at the end of the day, and I know I sound like I'm going back and forth, because these are difficult decisions to try and recommend to people, and I know the buyers are going through the same thing. If you're the kind of person that's like, I don't care, I'm building a new computer, I want the most performance I can get for the money, then you got to go with the 10600K between these two. But if you're one of those people that's just like, I hate Intel, well then obviously your only other choice at that point is AMD. I hope you learned something today. This is the first time we saw where manually overclocking the AMD only does a disservice because we lost score. And I guess that's been the case all along, but we really noticed it today by seeing a reduction in score when we overclocked it, because we weren't overclocking it, actually. We were middle clocking it, if that makes sense. We weren't letting it go any farther than like halfway where it would normally sit, which didn't do any good. What we need is AMD to catch up frequency-wise to Intel. Once that happens, I think then the fight and the competition really takes place. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching today's video. We spent a lot of time testing these numbers. I hope they mean something to you, and I hope it helps you make a choice or a decision if you were considering shopping for either of these two CPUs. We still owe you the 10900K versus 3900X. I'm sure a lot of people have done that test already. You can get a lot of information already, but we're gonna do it our way as well moving forward. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Oh, and the car channel's alive again. Make sure you guys go and see me do stuff with an old car. Like hit myself in the face with a hammer, literally. You should go watch it.